gotta let it down, 'cause you can work wherever now.
What's up, guys? Welcome into the Work Wherever podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about AI automation, the ability to work wherever so you can live every day like it is Saturday. And I got my man, Callye Keen here.
What's up, Roy?
What's up, dude? You're my first, real guest in the studio. So I greatly appreciate you making the trek, man.
A great fall drive, so
It's
nice.
It's not bad with the leaves and everything back here. Yeah. No, I appreciate making the drive, man. And we're a lot closer than I realize a lot of times.
Yeah.
There aren't many people in this area that I communicate with, especially in this field. I feel like everybody I talk to is flying in here for conferences and then they leave.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you stopped by and I appreciate it. And I'm really excited about this conversation because we were at DC Next. Well, you were there. I was in attendance. You were one of the moderators.
Yeah. We had an event a couple weeks ago. So DC Next was MIT Entrepreneur Forum. We do an annual event and we chose AI this year. Last year we talked about dual use startups, which is, that's kind of my wheelhouse, but we talked about AI and the security around that. This year we had some really great speakers from Amazon, Google, Meta, the Navy. I did a panel with startups, surprise.
Right.
Talked to some of the people that have been alumni of my accelerators and, just kind of around the DC startup scene, which is pretty tech focused. So not hard to pull a couple of winners out there and tell people, hey, here's the update of what we're working on. This is what we're concerned with. This is what we're seeing. So
yeah, it was an interesting conversation. We had the AWS person go first. At least that was the first talk that I saw, I'll say. And she painted one picture, and then we had a couple more people come on after her, like your group, the startups who were talking about the AI that they're doing, telling a slightly different story, which led into the Navy, who of course tells the government story, which is far different than commercial. So what did you kind of make of the Meta, AWS, and even, I know Microsoft wasn't at your conference, but there's that one approach to AI, which is like, hey, this is the future. We got to go. And then there's the Navy government side that's like, we know we need to use it. We're trying to figure it out. We want to make sure that things are secure. Where do you fall on the...
Well, let's break this up a little bit, because with our speakers, we really avoided, and this was very difficult, to avoid having just the hype people.
Yeah.
And to be fair, at the big companies, when they send somebody out, they're going to bring the careful PR person, and it's a little bit of hype, right? But we didn't have the AI maximalists talk and spin a yarn about what the future is going to look like. It's not that kind of event, more of a nerd focused, real deal event. But there's a lot of crazy talk in the industry. When you see what the companies are doing, they're going to tell you the more outward acceptable story. I really wish that we were able to get a spokesperson from Microsoft, which is strange because they do a lot of really great stuff. They had an event really like the next day or the next week from ours, and that might be the case, but they do a lot in the area for AI education. My personal feelings is that their platform, what they're doing, is really far ahead of what everyone else is doing, even aside from OpenAI, because that's like everybody thinks AI,
right,
yeah, right. It's way more than that. But their whole platform, the way that they're doing distributed computing, cognitive services, it's pretty crazy. You can go down a really deep rabbit hole. Infrastructure wise, I think they're ahead of a lot of the other players in the space. But at an event like that, when you have 30 minutes to speak or you're on a panel, you're not going to jump into how all that stuff works.
Right.
But for people that are listening, look at AutoGen, right? Look at AutoGen. It's really amazing. Basically having multiple virtual agents be able to communicate with each other. So think if one bot was a person in your office, you can have all of the bots be all the different people, and you can have them communicate with separate roles, permissions, actions, sources of data. Very, very interesting. And that's starting to get into the geeky territory, even with those big companies. So once you go a little bit farther, you start talking about startups, we can get into some really crazy conversations. And the Navy, to be fair, so we had Jack Long there. The Navy is very forward thinking about AI.
Yeah.
I will say I spoke at Fort Liberty a month ago. They're very forward thinking about where AI is going, providing services right to the edge for modern warfighter. That's very interesting.
Break down the edge for me real quick. So there's edge and fog, which are two kind of categories of cloud that are, I don't want to say it's like new, because it's not necessarily new, but it's a new concept to maybe somebody.
Yeah. Well, tech goes into cycles, and this is a parallel conversation to AI, because you think of the compute power that we really need to perform the calculations that we want to use. We want to use something fun on our phones. Our phones have tremendous compute power, but relative to what we're doing, it's never going to happen, right? So what we're seeing is this move away from the PC revolution, or you think of things being locally functioning on our desktop computers or our phones or devices in the case of the military, and looking at those more like those are interfaces or sensors. They do light compute. And that means that we have to do distributed computing, where the computing power is spread from maybe a data center here in Ashburn to something that's physically located in a forward deployed, like in a tent, right? And it's doing a part of that in case there's no communications back to, let's say, garrison level or back to the data center level. And we're able to then, in the case of the Army, we would be able to pull cognitive services or AI services, whatever processing that we want to do of sensor systems, of communication systems. We're able to do that there. And then that is connected to what somebody's wearing, or what's on a vehicle, or what's on a bird, UAV, or a sensor that's strapped to a tree, and that all those things are connected together. So in the past, a sensor system or a radio system would function like your PC, where it would do all the processing it could, and then it would throw the data or throw the signal, and it would be caught and captured and then maybe further analyzed. But it would be like a very robust thing, where now with the edge, or what I would say is beyond edge, is like we're able to pull data from anything, compute at the level that's appropriate, and then everything is interconnected. And in a lot of ways, what we're seeing with AI helps that happen, because there's a lot of interpretation of data paths, security of the data path, different possible places where different pieces of it can be analyzed, put back together. It's really, really interesting the way that the modern military is thinking about this. And we can pull some of this from modern, like, IoT infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right. How mesh networks work, how mass sensor convergence works for bigger, very sophisticated systems, and pull it in. But it gets into a fun territory. It also gets into a kind of odd territory where you realize, like, everything is a sensor and everything's pulling data. What does that mean for my personal security?
Right.
If everything has AI processing capabilities, like, what's actually being processed? Where's the data being used? How's it being used? Who's using it?
Right.
Yeah. So
who's using it is like that's the biggest one that we've been focusing on in terms of like congressional regulation and governments getting involved. And people don't really think about, like, they think about like who's processing, but they don't think about like where it's being housed. And there's so many different, like, it could be anywhere. I mean, we got in a little bit of I don't want to say trouble, but conversational trouble, I'll say, when COVID, the whole pandemic thing kicked off, and Zoom was housing and running data through Chinese servers.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, that's one instance that we caught. There's artificial intelligence and constant processing that's happening constantly. Yeah. And the amount of data that's being processed is unfathomable. There's more. I saw a statistic that, and this was like 5 years ago, that there was more bits of data in the cloud than there were bits of sand on Earth. And you have to think about that. That's being processed like continuously. It's just crazy to think about and then when you add edge into it, it's like, okay, well, we took those big data centers that were in Ashburn, like you're talking about, which were here at the heart of the internet, right? You take that Ashburn data center, and now you put it onto a tractor trailer or a suitcase, and you deploy it anywhere in the world. So now who's got your data?
Right.
It's insane.
Well, also proportionally, that data center in Ashburn has, again, proportionally a higher level of compute as well, because they're using things like what we're building, using Xeon scalable processors to do like water cooled, incredible amounts of power, incredible amounts of memory right there. Using, if people want to dive down this road and see like what type of compute power is out there right now, you realize that a single server is more than a whole row of data center servers like 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's like when you think about the original computer that came out, right? And it was the size of a room, and now we walk around with this computer on our wrist or our pocket. Think about that, but in terms of data centers and the amount of process.
But the data centers are still not big enough, so they're building them as fast as possible. So that's the kind of data that we're talking about. And so you get into this security, privacy conversation, which we got into a little bit the other day, because the immediate knee jerk of the big company PR or the government people, because we're in the,
like it or not, that's where we live.
Yeah, where we live, right? They're like, oh, well, we'll create regulation for it. And I just think that that's the funniest, cutest thing in the world, because you can't regulate AI in any way. It's impossible. It's probably the least capable of being regulated technology ever. But I think from the adversarial technology approach, like the Zoom example, there's this huge push, at least, in my industry and defense industry, to reshore everything. So, we're building a board line to build our own PCBAs. We build everything from scratch. We design our own networking gear, compute gear, stuff like that.
That was the push 5-10 years ago, was let's take this thing globally. Cloud, you can do anything from anywhere. Even our organization, work wherever, right, is our hashtag. And so it's like, well, let's put the data wherever you are. And okay, now we've opened this remote developer, and you had all these offshore developments spin ups, and then even some of the big guys were using offshore development. And now it's almost like we've realized that we went too far down the rabbit hole. We're like, we need to bring it back. So that's where let's bring everything back shore. Let's control where the data is coming from. Not only where the data is being housed, where it's coming from, but also who has access to the data. Because, maybe it's not a good idea that, longshot123 at yahoo.com, who's in India, has access to our information.
Or are they in India?
Right. Who knows where they are? They could be using a VPN or...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we go through these mega cycles in tech, particularly, and you see this hype cycle in startups or just fashion trends or whatever. But in tech, you see, how they say history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. In tech, you get to see that faster because tech moves.
Yeah, constantly. Right. Yeah.
So computers started out with that mainframe. Then you'd have terminals. Then we had the PC revolution. And now we're going back to mainframe and terminals. What that kind of means is different, but we see the same thing with the technology at the board level. There's lots of really great exploits of people hate sleeping at night. You can read about, buying a vacuum cleaner off Amazon and how you can push a firmware update over your Wi-Fi and then it can spy on you in your house. Like, I mean, that's why the thing is $100, because he's financed by the Chinese government to spy on Americans. But and if that sounds crazy to say it, but
when you really take a look at it, it's not that crazy.
That's real deal.
Yeah.
And so, the U.S. government has this interest in going back to what they did to build Silicon Valley, right? So Silicon Valley was built because the government went in and said, we're going to help finance this. We're going to take the schools, so academia, government/military / private industry. We're going to make this triple helix of innovation, and we're going to pool all the resources. And today, America owns that innovation in that area. It's a disproportionate level of impact in tech, but we kind of got away with this, the view, okay, we can play nice with everybody. You could call it a globalist view. You could call it a, world-centric view, whatever you want. Is like, we can import these people. We can work with these people wherever we want. We can buy stuff from China or from India. Don't have to worry about it. But we've seen that played out as mass intellectual property theft that's in billions of dollars per year. We've seen that played out as hardware that has embedded spy devices in it. So again, this sounds super paranoid, but I know that when we make something, we have to scan it to make sure that there's not a chip inside of the chip, or that it is the thing that we think that we bought, it matches the first article of that, because this is a fairly common supply chain hack for spying on the US government, and we know who does it, and we do business with them all the time. And so there's this trend to come back and say, okay, us as a country, if we want to be serious about whether it's the software like AI, right? If it's about our data, or if it's about our personal or military electronic devices, like, we need to know who has control over that thing. I need to know the bill of materials for the hardware and the software, and I need to know who's working on it, where they're physically located. I need to make sure that whatever devices that they're using are secured, right? Big push in remote work to have people still inside of a secure enclave.
Right.
Anybody that's a tech person, I highly advise you looking at securing your remote workers.
You have to.
Yeah.
And you have to, I mean, look, we're a fully remote organization, and to say that I keep tabs and track the IPs and how people are traveling and how they're connecting is an understatement, because you have to. We had somebody who worked for me who traveled, and we followed him from Texas to New York. Clearly, he's on an airplane traveling. And as soon as he left the country, we had to stopgap. Now, I don't think he had malicious intent in mind. There's no indication that he was trying to do anything malicious, but it's just something that they don't necessarily think of when you're connecting to these networks. Who has access to these networks?
Yeah.
So it's no longer, well, we hired a bad apple. It could be, we hired somebody who just doesn't understand the repercussions of connecting to Wi-Fi in an airport.
Sure. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Feel free to fly to China if you want. I haven't been in 5 years, but
you bring your internet.
Buy a Chromebook.
Okay.
You can buy a Chromebook and throw it away when you're leaving.
Yeah.
Because the probability of intercept as soon as you land in Beijing is 100%.
Yeah.
Interesting thing about the Chinese government is, like, they don't feel bad about that, and they make it very clear that that's what's happening.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's part of what we're supposed to do. Yeah, right.
Because we come from a different culture, we think when somebody says stuff like that, like, I'm being paranoid, which part of my job is to be a little bit paranoid. But so that's a fair assertion. I do really odd security stuff, but their government is fairly honest with us. They're not very honest with their own people, but they're pretty honest with us. Like, here's our plan. This is how we're going to take over your country. This is what we do to all of your visitors. You're tracked 100% of the time while you're in the country, et cetera. Make it very clear. But with your general remote work, I mean, it's easier than ever. I don't know how geeky you want to get on the podcast, but, like,
geek out, man. We can always go in and then come back out.
If you look at something like, moving to a secure or enclave, right? And then you have remote people using a VM, they're using a virtual machine, you're accessing a secure virtual machine at all times. You put Intune on their computer, okay, they're accessing it from this computer, they're accessing this actual virtual computer that's completely secure. It's being monitored by the other tools that are inside of Azure. So that has gone in the past few years from being insanely difficult and kind of a patchwork of software that was required to literally being 1 second.
Totally spun up immediately. And it's just a matter of monitoring at this point.
Yeah.
So you know what you're looking at. in.
Yeah, like using Sentinel to make sure it pulls logs and like looking for they have little recipes of this is aberrant behavior. So you to your point, like a computer moving outside of its normal location would be something. Okay, that's
Send an alert.
Yeah, send an alert, right?
Impossible travel's another one.
Yeah, impossible travel. Yep. So like that's actually just baked in. Which is really, really cool. And to that point, I have a pretty secure company, but we have a lot of remote workers. Now
Most tech companies do.
Yeah, because people just there's no point in we make physical things, but for engineering staff or other support staff, they don't have to be in 100% of the time. So like, why make that part of the job? And we're trying to hire any flavor of talented engineer that we can as fast as we can. So anybody that's listening, you are a geek, I'll probably hire you. I'll definitely put you to the test. So if you want to build stuff like network engineer, computer engineer, programmer, electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, mechatronics engineer, any flavor of those things, I'll hire you.
There is a, not to cut you off, but there is a very shortage of those individuals in the market.
Yeah.
People who actually understand. And now if you look at the trends of this low code, no code revolution, which I'm a part of, so I support it. But the other side of the coin of the low code, no code revolution is now you're empowering citizen developers who really don't understand what they're doing. And now, oh, by the way, here you use Copilot to go build an app. Now you can build 100 apps, and whereas before maybe you could just mess up one piece of data, now you're messing up hundreds and thousands of pieces of data.
3D printing of programming.
Yes.
Right. So we saw this same thing. Say, I went to my first convention at the Ford Center, Detroit, in like 2006 for 3D printing. And we were like, oh, this is pretty cool. How are we going to use this? Try to get our hands around it. About 2014, it really was at the peak fervor. This is going to replace all forms of manufacturing. But what it really did was that and low-cost CAD tools, it made it so people who don't know how things can be made, they could design it and 3D print it, which is really cool. But then how do you translate that into an actual production environment? Can't actually scale. The cost isn't there. The time isn't there. It's not. And no matter what you read online about how they can do distributed manufacturing, it was all puffery by people who have never held a wrench in their life.
Right.
It can't happen.
Right.
Low code is kind of like that too.
Yes.
For you and me, like if I need to bake something up really fast, hop into a low code environment, whether that's Microsoft or Bubble, build something cool, test it and try it. But I would need to pass that off to somebody. I'm not going to like deliver that to a customer. It's embarrassing.
Right.
It's not scalable.
There has to be an area of customization, some actual coding that's involved, connection behind the scenes that needs to take place in order for the customer to even find any bit of use out of it.
Yeah, but the problem is right now that's being replaced by it being the thing instead of a thing.
Right.
And so if you have a low level of like tech understanding, you want to jump into this like AI revolution, like we were talking about this, hop into Bubble, it connects with chat, low code platform, you're kind of injecting AI. I really don't think that chat is like, it's a AI model interface. It's an API to a model, right? It's not actually AI, it's a tool, right? And this really, it annoys the hell out of me, but that low code lets you do that, right? But those things will never scale. The API is really slow. Low code can't be deployed at
the UX looks pretty much exactly the same through all of them.
Yeah.
Like you want to customize app? Okay, yeah. Tell Copilot or tell any low code tool through just English, because you don't have to know how to code. So you're just typing it in, and then okay, all right, well that looks exactly the same as this. It has one screen. Oh crap, there's an error. How do I fix this? Delete, start over.
Yeah. So my problem with this is that it's training another base layer of these people who their job's one's going to get eaten because AI tools for programming are like right here, right now. But it's empowering bad intellectual property creation, because that's not very secure. It's not scalable. It becomes like the thing, whereas if we took the harder path and said, let me start with C++. Let me start with PHP, or let me start with Rust or Python if you want to pick newer languages. And let me actually learn how to code. Your progress is going to be absurdly slower, right? But you're going to know how it works.
Right.
And then all the AI tools are this massive boost to your productivity instead of the only thing you ought to do. And all the engineering is the similar ways. There's all these amazing tools now, but for the most part, if I asked a graduating mechanical engineer to build me something, they can't build something.
Right.
And it's pretty depressing.
It is.
Yeah.
The college landscape, and look, I went to college, so I'm not
Our generation, we're the suckers, right?
we were the That's right. If you didn't go to college, then what were you?
Loser.
Right. But the people that are coming out of college now, and so, in the software industry, all I can speak on is the software engineers that are coming out.
Mhm.
And they've been taught a language or how to think around a language that no longer exists.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to apply, oh, well, this is the way you do it in here. Well, that's not necessarily true. Oh, okay, well, then and then they revert back to this low code, no code that they're trying to fit a square peg through a round hole. And then you're basically overpaying for a really smart citizen developer, or someone who perceives themselves as smart as a citizen developer. And so that's where we have this like vicious cycle of where do you start? Who do you really trust at this point? And I feel like that's where, to your point, people like you and I, we've seen this a time or two. This is not our first rodeo in terms of, oh, there's a new tool out there that's going to help you. I revert all this back and I point to like Dreamweaver.
Yeah.
Where, it was like when Dreamweaver came out and you could click and drag and build your own website. Yeah, sure. But then when you go to the website and everything's broken, or
are you going to dive into actually open it up in Notepad or God forbid, like an actual online server-based text editor,
right,
and edited by hand,
right?
Yeah, up until just a handful of years ago, if you couldn't do that, you probably couldn't make a site that scales, right?
Right.
I think
you build a landing page, but we're talking about like an actual running application, a functional site.
The college thing is pretty goofy. When you talk about the difference between it being knowledge and applied knowledge, there's very little application of the knowledge. So I started in computer science at Virginia Tech, and I already knew how to code. I'd taken a few years of programming. I programmed as a hobby. That was like my identity at the time, right? Okay, so I'm going to go to school for computer science. Taking the classes it's very academic, and they want you to teach you algorithms and the math between the algorithms, and that's all well and good. If you actually wanted to learn, you had to build something. And my thought immediately was, well, I'm already building stuff. What am I getting out of this?
Right.
Like, when are you going to teach me the thing? And I look at the curriculum, and bear in mind, this is 2000, right? So it's a long time ago, but there's not a single thing on here that they're going to teach that I don't already do. And this is just getting in the way of me building projects.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It was really, really frustrating. And I think that's the problem, is most of academia is still like that. Is like, these things are very important to know. Like, why? Because we need to know them academically. Okay, that's fair. That's kind of the same argument that we're making with learning how to code versus using low code. It's like, we want to know how it works, but I want to know actually how it works. I don't want to like tell you what the big O of an algorithm is. I want to actually make the algorithms, and it's like, okay, now how do I code using these sorting algorithms to figure out which one's faster? How do I deploy this type of idea? I want to actually do it by building a thing. And school was such a bad fit for me. It was awful. So looking at hiring, it's been really difficult because there's people that are very academic, and they tend to go to larger organizations, because in a larger organization, it's very easy to do something specific and hide. or they are really focused on doing stuff themselves as well, and then they go and found companies. So they're like the startups that I would work with, or they're friends of mine. So they're like, yeah, school sucked, but I just did what I was supposed to do, and I built this thing on the side, and I launched it, and now I'm looking for like $10 million from investment. It's like, well, I can't hire you.
Right.
I don't want to hire.
Right. I don't want the other guy. Right.
So like, how do I grab that person and be like, let's build Kform together. Let's build Startups Ignite together. Let's build this thing. How do I get them involved in what I'm doing? And that's really been the core challenge around. It's like, we want to do more interesting things. We're doing more with AI. We're doing more in building these embedded and specialized systems for the military or for the tech industry, and do really interesting things, and trying to get out there and talk to people and grab them. Maybe they're a sophomore or junior in college, and like, this isn't really working out. I want to build race cars. I want to build like satellite system. I want to build something cool, and how do I like grab them and be like, listen, dude, these people are this is a total scam, right? It is a total scam. Like, I can take you to a training course that's going to teach you how to do all this analysis that you're going to do in 2 years. You can learn this in 3 weeks. Okay. There's tools for it, teach you how to do it. You're going to do it in real life. You're going to learn more by actually seeing how it works. You're going to learn it faster, but you're going to actually really, really apply the learning knowledge, like know it. But the way that the market is set up right now, especially again in this area, I want to keep picking on the Washington D.C. area, but it's kind of like, this is the quintessential go to college, work at beyond kind of like,
right,
like stay the.
Who do you work for? Where'd you go to school?
Yeah,
those are like generally the two questions that you get when you meet somebody. Yeah. So, what do you think about hiring somebody and then training them up yourself? Do you do any of that?
It's the only way to go.
That's the only thing I do too.
Yeah. We hired a bunch of manufacturing people right out of retail stores. It's like, okay, I see that the store is very organized and clean, and so it means that you're used to working for a place that has some kind of rules and culture. You want something with set hours, maybe better pay. Let's give it a go. Much easier to hire somebody that had no experience. Because what was happening, say, as a hiring machinist or somebody in manufacturing, is if we were getting a highly skilled person, one, there's very few of them nationwide, really,
that are actually skilled. There are a lot of people who might claim to be skilled, but
then to layer on skilled, don't have bad habits, don't have a bad attitude.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, and I just don't want to work with these people. I grew up around a pretty rowdy mix of people, like different, all kinds of different backgrounds, but blue collar backgrounds. So a lot of just absolutely wild people. And we're like, that's how it is. Like, that's the culture of the business. That's how it is. Now we can train somebody up in like 3 months. We can train them up in a year or two to be as good as somebody with 10 years of experience. Yeah. Right. And like, it's much easier when you're working with good people, because there's not other individuals trying to undermine them. There's pretty clear hierarchy of who's doing what. We have all the resources. If you need something, we're going to buy it. It's a lot easier when you have good people, and that becomes the thing you need to protect. This is like, I really don't think training is the difficult part. You can see if somebody has a knack for it and find a place for them pretty quickly. But it is, I would say, it's difficult in general to find somebody who's like, I'll just say this, is like, we went through a period of growth a few years ago. I think we had just met at that point, but we essentially tripled the size of the business. Mm-hmm. So I hired like 30 people to try to get just a handful of people, because you just go through them.
You keep all of them?
No,
right.
No, absolutely not.
Right.
But it was like, we'd hire somebody and they'd keep like goofing off and making a huge mess, and you have that conversation with them and be like, yeah, I'm just like not used to this thing where like working all day. Yeah, it's manufacturing. You're like gonna actually do this thing. It's not ultra strenuous, but you're going to do it like the majority of the day, like 6 out of 8 hours.
Right.
He's just like, it blew his mind because he's used to like kind of just screwing off
Right.
for the majority.
Messing around, maybe getting a couple hours work in.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, that's not how we do it. That's why we have under 30 people and like do the same amount of work as somebody that has like 50 or 60 people who
Right.
are organized. Like this is like a pro NFL team. You're coming from like Pee Wee League.
Right.
Like we're organized.
Right.
And he's like, it just blew his mind. He's like, this is like, I can't believe it. Guys just like work all day. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we have as similar as well, where I take people. I don't like hiring because you touch on it. The number one thing that you touch on in terms of hiring is bad habits.
Yeah.
You bring people over and they're like, oh, well, I'm used to doing like this. Okay, well, I don't care.
I don't.
We don't do it that way. This is the way that we do it. And so I've brought in like bartenders, cooks, teachers, librarians, brought in event planners, just good people who are willing to learn and understand, and then teach them our way of doing things.
Right.
And we've been able to keep our team lean.
Yeah.
And I know they're going to follow the playbook. To use that professional football terminology, it's like this is the playbook. Don't deviate from the playbook.
Right.
You know, the play is not going to work if you try and do your own thing over here. And we've been able to scale. I mean, we're not anywhere as large as you are, but I mean, on another sense, we don't really necessarily have to be because we're doing software. But yeah, grabbing the right people and training up the right people, I think, is the only way you can do it. Instead of trying to, I've heard of other companies where like, well, I'm just going to hire somebody as a lead who's going to come in and just never works.
That's the same kind of magic bean thinking where I talk to early entrepreneurs and they're like, yeah, I'm going to have this magic idea and, you know, I'm going to have $1 million business. I'm like, brother, I hope you have that right. Yeah. But in reality, if I gave you $1 million contract right now, it would be really hard to execute on. You got to think of like the burden of success that you're asking for. Like you don't have
you have no idea what you're saying.
You have no idea what you're saying. It's ridiculous. Yeah. And so when I do a lot of startup coaching, run accelerators for whatever since 2016. And that's the most common thing is like you'll have a technical person, like, yeah, I'm just going to hire a CEO or some person to do my sales for me.
I got this great idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Like, I just want to stay in the weeds as a tech person. And I tell them like, well, realistically, you're not going to get a good person to join you when you suck. Right. So like, you're going to get a bad person who wants to join the team.
Right.
So
you're going to get an equity thief is who you're going to get.
Yeah. Like, so I would really recommend you looking at, let's set a goal of say $1 million, right? Or this much of a raise, or like these things that are going to happen. And then you'll be able to attract the kind of person that would be a good partner, but you're going to have to know how to do those things.
Right.
You can't just, so there's a difference between delegating and advocating, right?
Mm-hmm.
And looping it back to AI, I feel like that's what kind of people are, you know, they're like, if I could just get AI to totally do my job for me, I'm like, if AI can totally do your job for you, guess what? It's going to happen to your job.
Right. Right.
It's gone.
You're right.
It's gone. You know,
that's the biggest fear everybody has right now is like, AI is coming for my job. And you're like, if your job can be replaced by AI, you're doing it wrong.
Well, I mean, let's be fair. Like we both have worked for big organizations, and like, you know, that the proportion, I heard Elon Musk say this, but I've heard friends of mine that are very successful say similar things. Is like in these big companies, a lot of the people, they're just self-supportive of the fact that it's a big company.
Yes.
So you'll have thousands of people, but there's really only like 100 people that are doing work.
Right.
Right. And I've experienced this. I don't want to like talk out of school, but every big tech company that you can think of, there is a 100x or 1000x difference between the people that do the work and the people that you most likely would interact with. But a lot of their infrastructure is to just be infrastructure. Like you have HR people who support the fact that there's a lot of people. They have a lot of people, so they need a bunch of project managers.
Right. You have middle managers who manage the managers. Who
It's just a bunch of like fluff. It's like foam, right?
It is.
And when you see them hire all these people and then fire all of them, I'm like,
right.
Yeah, okay. But to be fair, like they have they need tons of copywriters and graphic designers and people that send out these little emails and build all those little bits and stuff. Yeah, those jobs are gonna have to change, or they will get eaten.
Evolve,
Yeah.
I think, is the way. Yeah.
Yeah. So I call this the great hollowing out. So if we think of life like an Oreo cookie,
Mm-hmm.
AI is gonna go take that and take the cream, the foam jobs.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be gone. It's gonna be people who do the thing and people who create the thing, and that's what's left. So you gotta kind of look at this and say, okay, I need to not just apply my knowledge and write a letter. I need to understand what's the psychology behind this letter, or I need to contribute to new intellectual property, or I need to implement new intellectual property. The kind of like copy and paste, Stack Overflow, like read how a sales letter works, like
Mm-hmm.
project managers, HR people, a lot of that stuff is just kind of. I do really strongly believe that all those people are unnecessary.
I think so too. Here's where we have two roles within our organization. Well, three. Two real roles. We have business analysts who are basically human mouthpieces. So I have to interface with the client to understand what it is that they want, and I have to interface with the developers so that so we're speaking the same language. Because most developers want to put their headphones on, sit in the dark, be in the weeds, like you just mentioned, and they just want to do their thing. Right. And then when they do open their mouth, it's very technical. And the client has no idea, nor do they really care what's happening. They just want it to be done.
Yeah.
Right. So I have BAs. BAs are the ones who communicate. They're translators. The other ones are developers. And that's it. That's all I have. I don't have project managers. Because my BAs can be a project manager where you're adding tasks into a board. And now I get AI to like help me speed the process of understanding and creating requirements.
Yeah.
So these whereas you look at you have quality analysts and you have business analysts, you have project managers, and you have testers, and you have UX, and you have these tech teams used to be 20, 30 people to build a single app. And now we're at this point where, to your point, a lot of the fluff, and that's just the tech industry.
Yeah.
You think about all the other industries where we're going to be cutting the fluff. It's getting back to what do you actually do? What do you do? And then we have marketers, of course, but even our marketing team is 1.5 people, right? Because I don't need 7 people to do it.
We're about to hire a marketing person. It'll be fractional. So
yeah. And you'll 10x what you would have gotten before with your team of 7.
Yeah. It's not even going to be a full-time role in a pretty sizable revenue company, because it's never really. I mean, I just do it myself. Right?
Yeah.
And,
we're of that same school of thought, right? Where it's
I don't really understand. I really believe. I don't really understand what these other companies do.
Right.
And they tell me these things, and if the economy does continue its trend of having a tightening,
mm-hmm.
whatever you want to think of it as, focusing, all out recession,
right? Yeah, right. We're a buzzword. You're going to use them
being sensible. I do think that project managers is it's a symptom of waste in an organization.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it works or not to increase delivery time or quality or whatever, it's still a waste. In theory, in a perfect world, there's only people that make stuff and sell stuff.
Yeah.
If you're other than making and selling, then it's a waste. Some of that's necessary waste. It is
it is
leaning it out is how can I lean?
That's why we call it overhead.
Yeah. It's overhead. So we have 2 people that do overhead,
mm-hmm.
and company, everyone else doing the work. Right?
I worked for an agency, and it wouldn't be very hard to find the agency, but I'm not going to call them out. And they would hire admins for every division and every office.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, 4 to 5 offices, 4 to 5 divisions under each office. So let's say there's 16 admins. Plus there was a division of admins that oversaw all the admins. And it's these admins are paper. They're walking paper around. They're ordering pencils. They're waste.
It's the weirdest thing to me, because you saw I got my auditor cert.
Yeah, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. But part of my job, whether it's developing a product or like working with startups or just being a consultant, like we'll go in and do a discovery and figure out like, okay, what do you actually need? What are you really asking for? And you'll see with some of these companies, like be in a room with 20 people. Okay, well,
who here does anything? Yeah.
Like, first of all, in this project, we're going to have a single point of contact.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So who's going to be that single point of contact? You just watch like the piranha frenzy happen. Like, oh my God, one person's going to be accountable. We don't do things like that.
Right.
I'm like, well, let's say you have 20 people in this room.
Right.
And like, you're still going to hire me.
Right.
Yeah. That's why you're $1 billion company. You're going to hire like an 8-figure company.
Right.
To like do work for $1 billion company because you have 1,000 people that do my job, but not one of them is going to do it. And so you dive into this thing and you realize like there's this massive opportunity for improvement. And that's why I'm really bullish about AI, even simple AI as an enablement. But I really think aside from that, if you look at improving an organization, automating bad systems, bad processes, it's just like if I hired 20 people without vetting them for culture and training them, right? You're just going to get this amplification of a bad idea.
Your bad stuff is just going to get bad faster.
Yeah. And so when you see people complain about AI for this or that, or like, it's not as good as this, one, they don't really know how to use the tools. They're probably just talking about chat versus like an actual running an AI model, which is very frustrating to me. But additionally, they probably are not that great at their job. So they're just having it, they write bad emails for their email sequences.
And now they're getting thousands of bad emails.
So it's like, okay, well, you're basically just telling me that you suck.
Right.
Now you figured out how to suck at scale. But
that's a great point, because so many people right now, they don't understand actually what AI is, which I look at AI the same way that I looked at like business analytics, like 5-10 years ago, where it's like people looked at like business intelligence and they'd be like, well, why do I need BI reports?
Right.
Well, what do I need this for? That's what, Bob does. Bob builds my reports, And now it's like, how many companies are not running BI reports?
Yeah, it's insane to not dashboard high level metrics and look at them.
It would be crazy. And so now it's like you have all these people that are like, well, I can't trust the robot. And you're like, okay, well, the robot is going to do exactly what you tell it. Yeah. So you feed it good information, it's going to give you good results. So why wouldn't you use that? Right. Everybody thinks of, okay, well, it's ChatGPT is AI, but or AI is ChatGPT, but really ChatGPT is a type of AI.
Yeah. So different examples of this is like, we do a lot of computer vision stuff, right? And so in your car right now, if you have a backup camera, it's using AI,
right?
Machine vision,
spell check.
Yeah, spell check is like is machine learning,
right?
And anything that has progressive feedback loop, like you can make an argument that like Google search, right?
Yep.
It has elements of these things, and certainly now versus before, it has elements of these things. And so AI is a pretty broad category. What makes it different is that there was a lot of funding behind it, and then a lot of academic research got actually commercialized. So there's a hefty amount of documentation around how to build different types of models. And then all of that research, it's available and it's easy to deploy now. So if you're not academically smart, where you're building your own like transformer models or figuring out how neural networks work, you can go read about it and be like, that's interesting. Or you could go to Hugging Face and get open source models and start implementing them to do whatever thing you want. You can combine them together, whether that's through AutoGen, Microsoft, or LangChain, open source, combine them to do different things and give you different outputs. So like the availability of the tool is what's really fed a lot of that conversation. But yeah, it is pretty frustrating. It's like talking to somebody and you're like, yeah, it sucks because I'm really good at doing this one thing. I'm like, I wouldn't bet against technology that just been introduced that is like not as good as you right now, because the smartest people on earth and the most money on earth is going towards this thing. And like you have a normal human lifespan
Right.
and have like a pretty limited, like finite knowledge set. So if what you're doing doesn't involve a high degree of intuition, emotionality, or like very strange lateral thinking, like AI probably already beats you, but most likely, again, like I wouldn't,
I'm betting again.
I wouldn't bet against it. It's like if you looked at optical character recognition 20 years ago, you're like, this is really slow.
Yeah.
And it's like you look at it now, and for free, I can go get an Arduino and a $20 camera,
Right.
and download code.
Right. We all walk around with the most powerful camera.
Yeah, you can just flip through a book like this fast, and like it's perfectly scanned, right? And a child can do it. And so I wouldn't bet against, for simple things that are very intuitive and easy to understand, I wouldn't bet against technology. Yeah, it's a bad bet.
I totally agree. And so here's what I'm not saying, and I'm not going to speak for you, but what I'm not saying is remove the human element from your customer interactions, because we've all been a part of a really bad bot.
Yeah.
When you take that bot and you take artificial intelligence and you place it into your organization, not in between customer facing and the customer and your organization, you place it inside your organization. And now I can go to Callye and I can have a handshake and I can say, hey, build that relationship. Hey, how's it going? What do you need? Okay. Boop. Is this what you wanted? No. Okay, hold on. Boop. Is this what you wanted? Yes. Okay. Great. And so like it doesn't, them, if they're to push the buttons, might get frustrated. If you look at, have you been to an Amazon Fresh, the grocery store?
No, wait. I've been to Whole Foods.
Yeah. It's almost basically the same thing. Yeah. Amazon Fresh is Whole Foods without people is what it is. Well, I was driving through, I think it was Alexandria with my wife, and I see Amazon Fresh, and I'm like, I don't know if we need groceries, but we're stopping because I've never seen one before, and I want to go into it. Okay, and so we've all done like self-checkout, right? And there's the person, and you push the button, or you need assistance, you raise your hand, and they come and they scan and say, hey, how are you? And they fix your problem, and then now you can get on with your day, right? Okay, well, imagine self-checkout, but nobody's there.
Right.
And you walk around the store, and you have this cart, and you scan the things into the cart,
And you just leave.
and you just leave.
Yeah.
And that's what HelloFresh is.
Yeah.
Sounds really good in theory.
Yeah.
The most frustrating thing in the world is when it didn't work. I'm taking my, macaroni and I scan it into the cart and it's like unknown object. And I'm like, hey, anybody here? Nobody's there. I'm frustrated. Even though the technology is probably fantastic, I just don't know how to use it. Right. And to your point, if you put bad information into the system, you're going to get bad results. So that's where I see the future of like human interaction with customers is I understand how to use our system. I'm going to assist you in getting the most valuable information possible for you.
Right. But like, let's look at this. Say I'm an engineer. I'm not the best at working with customers, certainly not a salesperson, but I have a decent amount of emotional intelligence. Now with AI tools, I can act as my own salesperson, my marketer. I can send those emails really fast, which that might be very difficult for me to communicate.
Right.
But I know what I want to say. So I put in some bullet points. It turns that into paragraphs.
Remove the buzzwords.
Boom. And it will empower me, but it also just got rid of somebody's job. And so the analogy that I'm giving, or the historical reference that I'm giving, is in the early 1900s, whaling was the biggest industry in the world, right? Whole cities were built around whaling, whole subsidiary industries around perfume, around whale oil, around, everything to do with whaling, right? And then petroleum products came into the market, and within a decade it was gone. Now, a decade sounds like a long time, but when you talk about 100 years ago, a decade was lightning change.
Yeah.
Another historical thing that I could pull is New York City hated all the horses that they had.
I was about to say horses.
Yeah. So they tried taxing, they tried making people store them in carriage houses, but there was literal just, there's horse poop everywhere. Right. Can't do anything about it. Cars come out. Everybody's like, the cars are unreliable. They break down. We don't have the roads for them. We don't have the infrastructure for them. But within 10, 15 years, they went from 100,000 horses in New York City to like 20 horses.
Police.
Really people. Yeah, just the people that are in like the horses that carry people.
Right.
And so all of the naysayers were like, this will never work. This is silly. And then it just changes overnight. And we're kind of there with the knowledge worker. So Peter Drucker coined this term in the 50s, the knowledge worker, right? He predicted, if you read the book of management, it's like 1955 or whatever, he predicted that there would be this new class of people, the knowledge worker. They weren't manufacturing people. They weren't like industrial workers. They weren't CEOs. They were this like new beast, this office knowledge worker. They would apply college level skills and interact. And I really think we're at that point where that is going to shift over into this age of wisdom, right? Where we're applying our knowledge in a contextual way versus like a rote application way, copy paste way, or we're like creating new things. Like we're now wizards versus like a blacksmith.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can draw a lot of interesting things, and people want to push back on that, but I just feel like the people that are telling me like we'll never replace horses, which is just silly. It's just like a silly conversation to have.
I totally agree. We just built so I was at the Shift Happen conference that was put on by AvePoint and Microsoft. It was a lot of Microsoft, literally the day after I left your conference. And they went over OpenAI and how to build OpenAI within Microsoft.
Yeah.
And so I have an Azure VM spun up with the cognitive systems that are running, it's ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo. And I have been brain dumping all of myself into this bot and putting like, what do I do if this is the system? Here's how you respond. What do I do if somebody asks this? Here's how you respond. Just brain dumping text.
Mm-hmm.
And now what I've done is I've handed that bot over to my marketer and I'm like, hey, when you create content, don't ask me to write it anymore. Write it with this bot that's going to echo chamber.
Yeah.
And so now I've scaled myself to marketing, whereas now I can go out and attend conferences and I can go do other things where I'm shaking hands and I have myself replicated through in bot form. Yeah. I think that's where we're at in terms of when you talk about knowledge worker, you take your best knowledge worker and you turn them into a bot. And now you take that knowledge worker to go solve customized problems at a premium. That's where I think that we're at.
Yeah, I'll give you an example we're doing right now. We're spinning up a fund, right? So we're raising right now. And typically you'd have to raise a very large fund and we'd have to get associates. And being a VC associate sounds like, oh, that sounds sexy, man. Well, really what it is you're the first line of defense because I already get pitched about 1,000 times a year,
mm-hmm.
plus or minus. I'll say for like our last accelerator cohort, we had like 120 qualified people apply for, was going to be 12 slots. And then we had 24 slots. We had 8 slots for a new cohort. So we have over 100 applications for 8 slots.
Mm-hmm.
So like when you raise a fund or you work with a VC, like all say 600 applications that are in that niche that I would normally get per year, which this is going to be, it's data and AI enabled climate tech stuff, right? It's circular economy stuff. That's what our focus is. Really great application of hardcore AI and data analytics. A venture associate would sit with Excel all day long. They'd watch a YouTube video, pitch, they'd read their pitch, read through all of their due diligence paperwork, and they fill out an Excel spreadsheet. And it's like mind numbing. I know this because I used to want to do that. I thought you're cool. And then somebody showed me what it was, and I was like, no. I'll just
That's
send.
not what I saw on the internet.
Yeah, that's not what I thought it was.
Yeah.
It is. And so I would just send them deal flow. So now we're next step of done the deal flow, run the accelerators, work for some of these other groups, and now we'll do our own fund. But we just built an AI that you fill out the application, which is kind of in line with what you'd see as a pitch deck.
Mm-hmm.
They can submit a video. It pulls the transcript off of the video. It pulls all the information off of whatever that they send, and it grades it in all of the same metrics that we have.
Yeah.
And it gives them a polar chart of each of those categories. It also gives them commentary on each of those little
Why it ranked it what it was.
Yep. And then it puts out a little, hey, here's our conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I won't say that it's like 1,000% correct.
Right.
Because
nor is any AI right now. Let's be clear about that.
yeah, because it also won't know very niche industry things where I'm like, oh, this is very clever because
Right.
of this.
That's not actually a concern. That's a plus.
Yeah. But to be fair, no venture associate who's usually in their early 20s
Right.
would ever know that stuff anyways.
Right.
Right. So in 30 seconds to a minute, it can sort through an entire deck, which would take somebody a day,
Mm-hmm.
maybe more. And so within a day, I can sort through all those applications, and that gives us this massive competitive edge because
Who ultimately makes the decision? You or the machine?
yeah. So
Right.
us as the GPs, like
Right.
it essentially spits out a report.
Yes.
We can watch the video, read the report, take notes, and then you have 3 GPs. So me, my partner at Moo, and then Chado, who's over at GitHub. So
3 people instead of you 3 people, and then a staff of associates who are going through this. Right.
yeah. And so typically, like with a venture fund, you have this management fee. So we can keep our management fee at 2% of the money coming in. That's not enough money to pay a bunch of associates. So usually they're really underpaid. We just don't need them because one, we're already connected to a crazy amount of these startups because of these other events, like the event you went to or our work with the Department of Energy. So I have access to hundreds and hundreds of these pitch decks
Mm-hmm.
already. And I can just reach out and grab those people. So we have the supply, but it's like, what do you do? Like,
Right.
we're going to make 42 bets over 3 years. So like, how do you turn 600 applications a year into, 10, 15 bets a year?
Who trained the AI?
We did like kind of a subsequent or like a sequential training,
Mm-hmm.
messed with it a couple ways. To your point, like organizing the inputs is important.
Yeah.
So when people apply, they're applying and putting in data in this certain
He
sequence.
knows what to look for.
Yeah, we're also building around what commonly you'd see as the structure of a pitch deck. But large language models are really good at kind of like sorting through
Mhm.
like a 45-minute conversation with that person and then putting those assertions into those categories. So we put a lot of thought into that. Funny thing, early, I was building this just in chat as a proof of concept before we went over into a more sophisticated implementation. And we messing around with it. Okay, it's incredibly mean. Like, it's just eviscerating people.
Right.
I'm like, it's not wrong.
Right.
Like, these are emerging startups.
Right. Yeah, of course, they're all not going to be great.
Yeah, we're cutting 50K, 100K checks. They're very early, but it was
Right.
investor rating. Like, be nicer. And then it's like super rosy. It's like
Right.
it's like 10 out of 10.
Right, like, this is awful. You can't tell me this is good.
Yeah. And then you're like, okay, now take this very moderate. So you use these keywords that it understands. It's like, okay, now use an even analytical approach. And it was like, boom, this thing's trucking right now. And then for fun, like, okay, write a rejection letter in the voice of Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank.
Mm-hmm.
And it just spits it out.
Yep.
It sounds like you can hear Kevin.
Yeah.
You're like, right.
We've done that same thing, except when I have imported myself, my own personality into it, and Sydney, who is usually on the podcast with me, she sits right there, and in hers, and I can be like, write in Sydney's tone.
Yeah.
And then I could be like, write the first paragraph in Sydney's tone, the second in Roy, and it'll spit it out because it knows how we act.
And so I have to say, like, with that, that's where the human touch, the creativity is still in the mix, because to do that in a fun way, or then to put your personality over top of it, it's an enablement tool. But as far as, I don't think we can't afford to hire for that fund. The money is just not there at the 2%.
Yep.
Without getting a grant or doing a ton of training, you also don't have time to do a bunch of different things. So it's like,
and you're still going through this information yourself. So I know that when I tell it to write it in my tone, I still have to use that. AI is really good at spitting out filler words, using the same type of words over and over again, speaking in third person, like doing all kinds of, and so we have to comb through it. But the point that I saw at the Shift Happens conference was, we used to start with a blank piece of paper.
Yeah.
And we got to okay or good. Very, very few times we got to great. And so now we're starting with a draft.
Yeah.
And everything shifts. So we're going to get to great a lot higher frequency, because of just by
your brain is much more geared toward editing things than creating things.
Yeah.
Right. It's built into how your brain has been wired, right? It's looking for problems. Your brain is really, really good at detecting issues. Creating things from scratch, like it's nebulous. It can be anything. So you can edit a document that's 1 pages in 15 minutes. You can clean it up, right? 20 minutes. You can edit something that's 30 pages in a couple of days. But if you want to write a 30-page analytical essay, like like, how do you even structure it, right? Where should you get resources? Like, who are the top people talking about this? Like, what are the references? Like, all of those things could take you a week, 2 weeks, 2 months, and we can do that in 2 seconds now. So it's like, I fear that there's a problem with convergence of thought, where the training library is, everybody's playing on the same thing. And so, like, everybody's asking it questions, and you get thought convergence, because it's kind of Ouroboros eating its own tail.
Right.
It's like everybody's saying the same thing. It's like Google search sucks.
Yeah.
Right. You type in something, you just get all these like spun lists that are written, and this is pre-AI. That's going to be even worse.
Yeah.
Why they're
right, because the AI is going to accelerate the bad.
Yes. And so you just get all this bad stuff where everybody's saying this top 10 things, can't get the real information. I feel like there's a lot of convergence around that for lazy people. Like, in putting a human in the loop allows you to have that originality still. Using more sophisticated tools allows you to have that originality still. But for the most part, I think that people will kind of be in like the listicle AI. But in general, when I have to do base knowledge work, I guess is my point, is like, I know what my output, like what my goal is. I know what good or great looks like, but I don't have time to get there. Like, this has increased my productivity for things like this, like, 100x.
Right. The key point of emphasis of what you just said was, and you guys are going to hear this over the next 6 to 12 months as starting to become best practice, just spoken across the board, is human in the loop. So the Instagram entrepreneur wants you to tell AI to do everything for you and then just auto publish. Think of this, write emails for me, auto publish, and I'm going to sit back and drive my Lamborghini, right? That's the new AI push that I think when I see people like Andy Frisella speak out and say AI is evil, I don't think he actually means that, because if he's running a close to $1 billion company, he's using it in some form or fashion in order to process the thousands of orders that he gets in a day. He's using it. He just means that not to have a human in the loop. And what you mean by that, and I'll let you clarify, but a human in the loop is you're getting as much information as possible, like your VC example. You get as much information as possible to present to Callye so you can make an informed decision or take an action.
Right. Whereas I think very quickly, and you already see this with Bing, but very quickly with Google, you'll see Bard step in, or when you search, it will just give you the answer. And so we have to be very cognizant of how is it arriving at that answer?
Right.
What are the references?
Yeah.
How do I dive in deeper? Right now, I feel like we're at a shortcoming. We're at a shortcoming because if I ask a question, unless it's a really odd technical question, I just get garbage.
Yeah.
Just page after page of spun article that's written by the same, SEO agencies. SEO is like ridiculous. I don't know why people want the traffic because there's nothing happening on their site and the ad revenue is not very, like, I don't understand like the play here. I mean, I know I've met a bunch of people that do this stuff and they tell me their numbers. I'm like, it's not, honestly not interesting because I care about how I make my money, but also like I make decent money. So it's like,
Right.
like you could make $10,000 this month. I'm like, dude, if I made that a day, I'd be out of business. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
I don't think this is the move for me.
Right. Yeah. I don't think you understand.
I don't think you get it. Like, I respect the hustle, but you're ruining all my search
Right.
results. I wish you would stop writing articles,
Yes.
but AI is going to change that. I'm just really afraid that it then controls the answers. So people are very concerned with, they type in one political question or one, social issue in Google and they get this kind of one response. Well, it's based on who writes his articles and how they're linked together. Like Google has patents on their algorithm. You can read kind of how it works. It doesn't work like that anymore, but you kind of get the idea. And we understand how large language models work, kind of. But it's based on the training set. So if we dump a bunch of documents in that are based on, say, Reddit posts, right?
Yeah.
That are, that are all skewed one way, you're going to get an answer another way. So I am concerned with not just the quality, but like the flavor of answers that people are getting. I think that's going to lend itself to, just like there's conservative news sites, there's going to be somebody who does a llama implementation. It's like a conservative llama implementation. There's going to be a Christian llama, and there's going to be a Muslim, implementation of large language model that gives you only answers that are, the right answer. That they don't want to get, they don't want to get porn. They don't want to get,
right. So how do we control that today?
I think there's a huge gap in the market for actually making curated large language models. If somebody wanted to create a 9-figure business right now, they should build it. They should be focused on building AIs that actually go out and find approved content, and they look for inconsistencies, in things that are incorrect in that content, and then they build the large language model with the right information for a specific demographic. Right. So if I made an entrepreneurial large language model, it gives you entrepreneur advice, but it was filled with pyramid scheme advice,
right?
Like, which is what would happen if you took like what's available on Google search. There's a huge amount of people that don't run real businesses. Like, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings that are listening, but
I do it every day.
Okay. Well, if you don't have employees that you pay, and you don't have expenses, you don't make a product and you don't sell a product, you don't have a business. Like, it's like whatever. It's not a business. Might be a way of making money, but if we were to take out all these people's advice, the Instagram entrepreneurs' advice, we were to take, Bill Gates' advice, we were to take like Elon Musk's advice, and we were just to take Peter Drucker's advice, like, they don't all jive together. But I think there's a lot of value in looking and saying, well, here's the top 1,000 business books behind like really, really smart people. Let's put this together. Let's make a large language model and let's sell that as a service. Let's take like all of the thought that's around the thing that I care about, whether that's a sport, a religion, a lifestyle. Like, let's take all this information. I don't have to agree with all of it, but it's all like within this sphere of acceptability, and we'll make an LLM for that. There's crazy opportunity in the market to do that, and then to actually show people like, hey, this is how we've trained the model. if you have information that you'd like to contribute to the model, here is a way to contribute to this other AI. It goes in this pool. We have people vetting this information. We have AI vetting this information. It gets updated every month with new information into the pool. Massive, massive opportunity.
So I have 2 more questions for you, because I know I could talk to you for all day, Callye, but I know it's Saturday here, and I'm sure you don't want to spend your entire weekend with me. So first is, at what point does somebody, any business owner, so like if you're from startup to enterprise, at what point do you stop using the ChatGPT free version of the world to looking into training your own AI? What is there a dollar amount? Is there a process amount? Is there a compliance? Or what's in your opinion, when do you shy away from ChatGPT free version to I need to train my own?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it depends on the general applicability of the role that you're going after. I'll say that I'll just pick on marketers because they just make themselves like such a massive target all the time. Is if you are in the marketing role and you're not in the chief marketing role, you're in content creation. Most likely all you need to do is have one saved chat that you use, that you've trained with all your company information. That's for that level. That's what we do. I have like a startup defense one. I have a startups ignite one. I have a Kform one, and I've told it what my business is, and it kind of understands. It might forget a little bit, it might hallucinate a little bit, but like most likely, if I'm doing something generic, hey, I've got to go speak at Fort Liberty. Here are the 4 products. This is what they're saying that they want to hear about. What does Kform have for them? Boom, it outlines it. I'll tell you, it's damn good.
Yeah.
There's at no point, unless I had security concerns, which I don't at that level, it's already public information, where I would do anything but just pay for ChatGPT, right? If I wanted to embed this, say like embed it in my ERP software, I wanted to build a low code product that I use internally, I'd start looking at the API, which can cost a little bit of money, or I'd start looking at other tools. I would do it more for an enterprise to think like, we have these roles. I can learn something. I can maybe excite somebody that's younger and more entrepreneurial and more organization, and I can create intellectual property and like very low effort. So I would look at it more like that. And if you can see on the low code side, or like just building up, let's say a Python, really small Python piece of SaaS, is there value in this? You can pursue the next step for it. But, Meta leaked Llama, their LLM.
Yeah.
So implementing that on a little standalone server and messing with it, you can do all these things for free, but time isn't free. So,
right.
I would look at that approach as like, what is my investment of time? Like, what problem am I trying to solve? If it's very, very specific, it better be very high value as well. You think if I had somebody who was going to be part of their job to maintain this thing, that person might get paid $200K a year, $300K a year. So like, is this worth $150K to me? Probably not. So can I watch YouTube and watch somebody do this in 30 minutes? Probably. Like, can I follow that? No. So I would look at like what the value of it is for me. All of those costs of implementation are dramatically lowering. I coach the people that are in our cohorts or the startups that were at the event. It's like, I know a lot of those people hate Microsoft. Please spend some time to understand what's coming down the pike with Microsoft. You're literally building a thing that they already have.
Right.
And you can't compete against them. That thing's awesome, right? Don't do that. So before you look at the cost of implementing your own thing, like spend some time in the ecosystem or talk to somebody like yourself. Like, what else is out there? What can you build with AutoGen basically for free? Or what can you do with very simple free agents? What's the next thing after ChatGPT? So can you spend a week with that and come up with something clever? You follow YouTube, talk to an expert, implement in a week or two. do it incrementally, but I wouldn't go out and like build an AI server and start, training a cluster and do all that. I'm having these real conversations with companies.
Yeah.
They're like, we're going to do an internal LLM. And I'm like, you should really talk to Scale or Lambda.
Right.
You
There's tons of web services out there.
don't do
Yeah.
everything you're saying right now is like in 2 weeks, you're going to wish that you hadn't spent a single dollar, right?
I look at it the same way as like those companies who are like, we're going to build our own CRM.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You're going to go broke doing that.
What problem are you solving?
Right. Yeah. So the last question I have is we've touched on it a lot today, and I appreciate your time, man, very, very much. Is if you put bad data in, you're going to get bad data out.
Yeah.
So what can I do before I even think about AI or automation or technology? What are some things that I can do to clean up the data or ensure that whatever system that I'm implementing does get good data?
This is like could be a really long conversation.
This is a whole podcast.
Yeah, this is a whole podcast. So I'll say like this: is like if you look at AI, the pinnacle of AI is to create a general intelligence, right? They say at its best, it's to try to replicate some super order version of our brain. The reason that people have junk in and get junk out with their AI is because look at their life, right? Look at what they do. You and I both know, we know a lot of entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah.
And they'll post online, hey, I'm reading this book. I'm like, what's a takeaway that you got from this book?
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
Just junk, dude. It's just like eating Reese's peanut butter cups and wondering why you're fat and it's sad.
Right.
Like it's obvious. So we have to take a step back and be like, okay, if I have a disordered brain and then I'm training this other thing to be my second brain or to delegate this role as a, Callye 2 or whatever, I have to consciously know what input is going into it. It's just like regular life, right? It's just like anything else. There is a huge market opportunity for building, think of it like a checksum version, or a consistency AI, or especially if we're pulling in our company's data, like a full SharePoint. You might have 3 processes on how to, process an order, and they're all different.
Right.
So it's something that
none of which anyone follows.
None of which anyone follows. Yeah. So like that is a very interesting portion of the market that will evolve with mass adoption. We're just not there yet. So this problem is occurring. This is why you see hallucinations in chat. This is why you see like, a hallucination that like it just fills in and gives you like a wild answer or something. But if you are training your AI, whether it's a single chat instance or if it's an LLM, spend the majority of your time thinking about how you're going to build that prompt in that chat. So this is the old sharpen the axe situation, right? And it's going to spit out the answer in 10 seconds. Don't worry about getting to the answer. Worry about getting to the inputs.
Right.
So think about all the information that a child would need to know to come up with an answer, right? It's just a little robot, maybe a robot, right?
Yeah.
And so if you put more time on that planning end, it will take care of you. Most people have solved problems. Most businesses are like very, very, very similar. Like 90% of the business is very similar. The other 10% is like, oh, but we're actually a plumbing company. It's like, well, a plumbing company is 90% similar to a ribbon company.
Right.
90% similar to any general contracting company and a lot of other service companies, right?
You provide a service.
Right? So like, you're not unique. You just run a bad business, right? And like, you're unique because things are going wrong. So like, if we're able to tell it what is unique about our situation, most likely it's pulling that 90% from its training set, and then it's able to tell us like, no, this is actually how this should work. Yeah. So I guess that's my broadest advice is like, it doesn't matter what scale this problem is. That problem scales really, really, really very large for the military. It scales like infinitely large. But if we spent 90% of our time focused on what that unique 10% is, like, and making sure that the inputs are good, our outputs are going to have a chance to live.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good. So how can people reach you? How can people get in touch with you?
LinkedIn's probably the best way right now. You know, I really pulled back from social media, the big deal. Um, you know, we're both in a group, and I think I wouldn't say I did myself a disservice, but I was like, I want to participate in the group, and I do something that's like not really in specific alignment with what other people do. So it's like, I'm going to be more approachable, use social media more. I'll, I'll help people that are in like broader e-commerce, whatever. I've easily sold like $100 million or more
Yeah.
bullshit online, but I'm like, I'll help broader people and become very accessible. I don't think that really did anybody much good proportionally. So I've really pulled back. I mean, you'll see like personal stuff on Instagram, maybe. Follow me on Facebook. I only use that to like harass friends.
Yeah.
But yeah, LinkedIn, pretty prolific. If you do care about startups or defense, like I have the Startup Defense is my podcast. I have people in that industry. I'm like a wonk in that industry. So like go around and
It's a DC term you guys have. So.
But yeah, like we have really great guests, like people that are in charge of innovation, the Army or the Air Force. We have great DC guests in that space. Really good conversations with VIP guests on. But I know. Otherwise, hit me up on LinkedIn. I have an old show. It's one of the most popular e-commerce shows on the internet called it's called End Hype. So if you're into e-commerce, like there's over 100 episodes of that. Pretty much, you can launch $1 million e-commerce brand for free if you just follow that podcast. I don't do that anymore, but I don't know. I'm out there. I'm the only person with my name, so it's pretty good for me.
Right. Well, we will make sure we put your LinkedIn in the show notes, man. I appreciate this, and it's been a great conversation. I feel like we need to do it again.
Yeah.
This has been a blast.
Yeah. Thanks, Roy.
Yeah, man. Thanks, guys. Hope you guys got a lot out of this. Share the show. We don't run any ads. We're not going to. So if you want to hear more things like this, the great conversations with Mr. Keen over there, then share the show. Thanks for hanging out, guys. Until next time. See you.
Hey there! Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for all the latest videos from Capital Presence.